Imagine having a family member that you are very close with, and you come to find out that she is a freak and completely obsessed with you. A follower named Jacqueline says that growing up, she and her cousin named Sam were very, very close. Every summer, they would stay at each other's house, they would sneak out together, they would go out together, they would do everything that normal young kids do. As they got older, they kind of started to separate a little bit, especially when Jacqueline got with her boyfriend named Ethan, and things started to get very serious. They got together, they moved in together a little bit after that, and she didn't really hear much from Sam until Sam got a boyfriend, and she calls Jacqueline. She's like, hey, I really want you to meet him. We should get together and have some sort of double date. And Jacqueline loved her cousin Sam. She's like, you know what? Yes, I would love that. Let's rekindle. Let's get back together. Like, I miss you. So they start hanging out. They go mini golfing. They go have dinner. They go just have fun. Sam starts to come over to Jacqueline's apartment, and things are going very well. Now, Jacqueline's hair has always been very short, kind of like a bob, and she gets highlights. Sam's hair has always been kind of longer, wavy, a little frizzy, and very dark. Now, after a few meetings with Sam, she noticed one day that she comes and her hair is short, like a bob, and now she has highlights. Instantly, Jacqueline was like, you know, that kind of looks good, period, queen. Then she started to notice that Sam was slowly morphing and changing her style into Jacqueline's. Jacqueline has always been very pink, very girly, very, like pastels. And Sam has always been like more darker, more grungy type. But now Sam's starting to dress like Jacqueline. Then one day, Ethan tells her, hey, I don't want you to fight. All I'm saying is that Sam followed me on every account that I have. Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, everything. And she's been sending me some very bizarre Snapchats, like selfies and things that she's doing throughout the day. And for some reason, she feels like Ethan is withholding information. He doesn't want to spill the whole tea. She just kind of gets that vibe. So she lets it go. A week later, 2 weeks later, she's like, no, something is not right. So at nighttime, she goes through Ethan's phone and she reads so many messages coming from Sam. And she's like, hey, what are you doing? How are you and Jacqueline's relationship doing? I hope she's treating you right because you're so nice and whatever. And Sam's like, she of course approaches the situation, goes to Sam's house and is like, hey, what is going on? This is not okay. You cannot do this. I need you to stay away. The next day, there is a fake account that is just completely bashing Jacqueline. Of course, she knows that it's Sam, but things just took a quick, extreme turn. There's accusations of Jacqueline cheating on Ethan. Like, there is so many crazy things happening. She completely ignores it because she's like, you know what? I'm going to block you out of my life. Forget you. Whatever. She starts to get letters. One day she comes out of her apartment and her tires, all 4 of them, are flat. She's getting unknown calls at work, making crazy accusations. She goes to Sam's house and it is gone. Like, she's gone. No one lives there anymore. She's like, all right, like, who is this girl? We haven't talked in 4 or 5 years. Who does she turn into? Because I don't know who this person is. It got so crazy. She started to get threats on Facebook from fake accounts that she had to make police reports. But she just wants us to be aware of everyone, not just our friends, but even our family members, because she said that who would have thought that someone that I was so close with could completely go berserk over nothing and essentially try to ruin my life. What do you guys think? Thank you so much to Jacqueline for sending me this story. If you guys like all things spooky, scary, true crime, and paranormal, please make sure you follow. And if you guys have any other stories, please send them via DM or email because I'd love to read them. And I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye!
Tonight's story is one of the most disturbing stories I have ever heard, so I'm going to be very careful with the way that I phrase things in this story, but viewer discretion is advised. So Pete is from Nigeria, and when he was younger, his parents didn't have much. They were struggling to put food on the table, they were struggling to pay bills, but luck would have it that his dad ended up getting a job at Pepsi, a good one, and then his mom got a job at a pharmaceutical company. Things were starting to look up for him, but because of his dad's job, they ended up having to move to a different neighborhood in a different place. Now, Pete said that the moment that he walked into this house, he had a very unsettling feeling. He said that it was just felt dark, like it was just covering them in darkness. So their first night there, they are getting ready for bed. They all go to their rooms. He goes to his room. So Pete falls asleep, and later on that night, he wakes up in the middle of the night, and he swears that he sees someone standing at the end of his bed. Now, at this point, he thinks that he might just be tired, and he might be just kind of like making this up in his head, because it was a new place, new house. He felt a little anxious, so he thought maybe that was messing with him a little bit. Little did he know that this would be the start of something terrifying. So fast forward to a couple weeks later, and he's coming home from school. He said that he had a lot of homework to do and that his parents wouldn't be home until around 7 or 8, so he decided that he was going to go upstairs and take a shower. So he gets in the shower and he's bathing himself, and suddenly he feels like an extra hand is rubbing his back, and it feels like somebody else is in the shower with him. So he gets really uncomfortable. So he decides that he's going to step out of the shower. He's not even going to bathe himself anymore. He doesn't even finish. He gets out of the shower. He walks over to the mirror. He looks in the mirror. And when he looks in the mirror, he's turned around and looking at his back, and there are 3 long scratches on his back. At this point, he's still trying to rationalize things. So he's thinking that maybe somehow he did this to himself. So he kind of just puts it in the back of his mind, and he decides that he's going to go to bed. So he gets in bed and he's just scrolling on TikTok. He said at one point he went to go like press the plus button where you can see yourself, like I'm recording right now, and behind him he saw something that he cannot explain. He said that this thing did not look like a person. It did not look human. It was horrifying looking. And as soon as he saw it, he said that it just said, Pete, in the most horrific voice he had ever heard. Now, he is frozen in place at this point. He is absolutely petrified. He has no idea what to do. So he decides that he's going to get up and run out and go to his little brother's room, and that's exactly what he does, and he sleeps with his little brother for the rest of the night. The next morning, he goes and tells his parents, and he said that his parents dismissed this, that they told him that he needs to stop watching scary shows and scary things on the internet because it's messing with his head. And he is like, it wasn't in my head, and they just don't believe him. Now, he said that after this, things got exponentially worse. He was seeing this thing everywhere. School, the pharmacy, the supermarket, even at church. He said that he was in the church bathroom and that something was calling his name from one of the stalls. This terrified him. So one night he goes to bed and he's trying to sleep when suddenly he hears something underneath his bed. And he looks over and he sees that thing poking out from under the bed, and it just says, Pete. He said that every time it started doing this, it would just get worse each time, scarier each time. He also said that he would be sleeping in bed and he would wake up in the middle of the night to something grabbing his feet and pulling him at the end of the bed. Now, I have to be careful about this next part. He was having nightmares where this thing was like what you do to trees when you chop them down, right? That was happening to him everywhere in his dream. This got really bad to the point where he was not sleeping anymore. He was falling asleep in school. He said that he was waking up every single day with new marks on him, and that the hospital became like his second home. He even said that he was losing, like, I have no idea how this was happening, but that's part of the reason he had to go. He said that it got so bad that his principal told him to go home and come back when he was well enough to be in school. So his mom gets extremely worried and decides that she needs to go to a pastor at this point. And after they go to the pastor, they find out that his house was owned by someone who worshipped not God, but, you know. I'm going to try to describe this next part the best I can. So he said that his room specifically was where they would basically give offerings, we'll put it that way, give offerings to who they were worshiping, if you know what I mean. And he said the reason why he was so sick is because that entity was basically acting the same as a tick does to a human being, if you know what I'm saying. So his mom tells his father, and his father doesn't believe any of it. He doesn't believe in anything supernatural. So it causes them to get into a big argument. His mom ends up taking him and his little brother to a new place, and he starts getting better again. Well, about 1 month passes, and something awful happens. He hadn't heard from his father in a while, so they decide that they're going to go check on him. They get to the house, and what they find, let me try my best to describe this. His dad, when they walk into the house, is laying on the floor. There's candles all around him, and there is a very strange word written across his entire body, and he is no longer here. Like, if you know what I mean. So after this is obviously heartbreaking, and they move completely out of that house. They get all of their stuff out of that house, and some time passes by, and he says that just recently he had a nightmare about his father that was really it sucked. He said that he had a dream that he was standing outside of that house and he saw his dad trying to come out of the gate of the house, and that his dad looked at him and said, "Help me." Before he could get to him, multiple hands pulled him into darkness. He said that this dream scared him so badly that he literally jumped out of bed, and he actually found out from people that people have seen his father standing on the balcony of that house still to this day. Okay, I'm so sorry, you guys. I almost couldn't tell this story. So here's the thing. I'm going to start telling long stories that don't have to be censored very soon, I promise you, if you know what I mean. So it'll be this week, I promise. One will be up this week. I'm sorry that I had to censor that entire thing. I hope you guys kind of got the drift of what was going on. But that is terrifying. It is so sad. It is mind-boggling. That is mind-boggling to me. That is one of the scariest stories I have ever gotten to me, because that interfered with real life, like literally. So the amount of intelligence and power that this thing had to have in order to be able to do what he did or she did or whatever this thing was it's scary. But what do you guys think that this was? This, like I said, this was in Nigeria, so I don't know a lot about the culture, but I would like to know your thoughts, opinions, and suggestions, and I think so would he. Please be respectful.
Has anything ever happened to you that felt like more than a coincidence, like it was meant to happen? Well, one of my followers, Teresina, had an experience like that she'll never forget. A few years ago, Teresina had gotten a call from her friend telling her that her friend's mother had passed away. Now, this was kind of expected, but she was very close with the family, so it was very upsetting for her. She decided that she would go out for a drive to clear her head, and she thought she's just gonna go wherever the road takes her, and she'll use a GPS to get back home. So as she's driving around, she ends up pulling up in front of a cemetery. So she takes a left and a couple more turns and ends up back in front of this same cemetery. Then she's a little bit weirded out, but she thinks, okay, I'm going to take a different route now. And she makes a different turn and she ends up back in front of that same cemetery. She said it was the same entrance as the last 2 times and everything. So although it's a little unnerving, she's like, maybe there's a reason. So she gets out to check out the area. She says, side note, she once heard from a medium that whenever you enter a cemetery, you should sort of introduce yourself and let it be known who you're there to see. So she kind of did that, and also said that she was just open to seeing whatever anything wanted her to see, since she felt like she was supposed to be there, because despite her attempts to get out of the area, she kept circling back. She kind of walked around and she studied a few flowers and picked up some trash that she found along the way. She said as she walked, she wasn't really looking up or looking around at all the tombstones. She was kind of keeping her eyes to the ground. However, she did come upon a tombstone, and when she looked up, her heart sank, because this tombstone had her name on it. Now, she said, sure, it could have been coincidence, but she has a pretty unique name. You don't really meet a lot of Teresinas around, and the odds of her stumbling upon a tombstone with the first name Teresina on it is something else. At first, her heart had dropped, but it was more of a confusion feeling than a fear. She said it felt like a message to her that there was just more to life than just what the eye can see. She also said that she felt like it came from a greater source, not just a random spirit or ghost. So the first thing she did was call her dad, because he usually has a good explanation for many things. He's always very rational. But when she told him, he kind of paused for a minute and said, you should call your aunt. Her aunt is secretly a medium, and when she told her the story, her aunt said that she also has the gift. So this leads her to a festival for psychic abilities, and she ended up getting readings from 4 different mediums. She said she didn't give them any information about herself, not her name, not any of the things that led up to this, but all of them told her the same message. All the messages were telling her that she had a gift being presented to her. They also kind of alluded to the fact that they didn't understand why she was coming to other mediums for messages, because she can do it herself. So by the time the 4th medium gave her the same message as all the rest, she finally did then admit why she was there, what she had been experiencing, and they basically offered her to help train her. They would help her use her gift, control it, and protect her energy. Teresina is cautiously still in the midst of this journey. It's just really enlightening to think that from one simple drive where she just followed her intuition led her to the opening of all these new possibilities. It's almost like things aren't so much coincidences as they are synchronicities, and a way to kind of guide you to become who you truly are. I'm sure Teresina will be in the comments. Let her know what you think. And let me know, has anything like this ever happened to you, where things align too perfectly to be just a coincidence? And don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
A woman named Mel is saying she drove through a ring of light portal in 2020 when she was out for a late night drive with her two friends. And even though nothing strange happened immediately after they drove through it, they all saw it. So she knows it existed, but she said nobody ever believes her when she tells the story. People either think that she was dreaming or that she's lying. And so that makes this perfect candidate for Spooky Scary Storytime, which is the series where I share listeners' allegedly true stories about the things that they think nobody else would believe. So she wants to know what you all think. Said she was 20 years old when this happened, as were her two friends, and none of them were working full-time because it was 2020. Like, there wasn't much to do and they couldn't go anywhere. So what they did was go on these late night drives to this mountain lookout. And she said past the mountain lookout there was this long range road, and it was winding, it was dark, there were no street lights, but after about an hour on the road it looped back to the main road, and this is the route they normally took. She said they knew this route by heart, and they would listen to music, sometimes they would talk, but it was really just nice to get out. So on the night, she says they saw this ring of light portal. It's midweek. There's no other cars out, which was not abnormal. They go to the normal mountain lookout and then go down this winding, dark range road. And she said that they were just singing, listening to music with the windows down. She was looking out at the distant city lights, but the stretch of road that they were on was pitch black, and all they could really see ahead of them was their headlights on the pavement, and they're on this straight stretch of road at the time. So she's looking out the window, she's daydreaming, and she feels the car slow, and her friend Tara, who's driving, says, "What's that?" And their other friend look ahead, and they see right before the next bend there is this glowing white ring of light. They said it wasn't solid or binding, and as they crept up closer to it, it didn't seem to change in size the way that a reflection would. She said it was clearly a fixture, like it was structural. She said it was glowing, it was transparent, but it looked like the only way to go forward was to go through it. There was no base, no source, no lights around it, just this glowing ring. Elle immediately freaks out and she starts yelling at Tara to stop the car. And Tara starts freaking out and she says, "I can't stop the car. I don't know what to do." And she speeds up. She speeds right through it. Elle said the second they passed through it, all three of them turned around and they're checking it out. There's nothing in the mirrors. There's nothing on the road. It was like whatever they saw was just a figment of their imagination, except for all three of them saw it. Elle said there was no glow, no reflection, nothing in the trees or the surrounding distance that could have reflected this light. But they're like, "Stop the car." Like something had to have caused this. Said the experience was so unsettling to all three of them that they stayed up for hours after, retracing their steps, going back and forth on this long range road, trying to figure out what caused that light, but they never saw it again. She said there wasn't anything strange after either. There was no missing time, no distorted memories, but they knew it wasn't a dream. She said there was nothing dramatic, just confusion, but we were all awake, talking in real time, so I know it really happened. Oh, she says, "I'm putting it out there now. I really just want to know what people think this was. Does anyone have an explanation, or has anyone else ever experienced anything like this?" I'm going to be sending Elle this link. Let her know if you have thoughts, and if you have a spooky scary story time that you think nobody else will believe, send it in. We would love to hear it.
Let's read another scary story. I live in an area in South Tucson, Arizona that is mainly desert, and the homes here are pretty separated from each other. I would always hear stories from Native American friends about, but I always brush it off as an urban legend. That was until one day about a year ago. I had been left home alone for the weekend because my parents went on vacation. I decided to sneak a few friends over for the night to hang out. Our backyard was large and surrounded by a small gate which leads to a wash full of trees and cacti. We had a fire pit, so we decided to have some drinks and start a fire. It was pretty common to see a coyote or javelina out back by the wash. This time in the distance, I recall seeing the shadow of a coyote walking through the brush. I brushed it off due to it being a common occurrence. 10 to 20 minutes passed by, and one of my friends said he was going to go get more beers. He said he was going to be back and went through the gate to the front of the house. A few minutes later, I could hear him yelling at us in the wash. The voice was faint, but you could tell it was him. "Hey, come back here, check this out." We peeked through the gate into the wash, confused to why he was back there, and then I saw it. I pointed my phone light, and through the cactus I could see it. It was like a coyote, only its legs were horribly conjoined to stand on its hind legs. Its face was rotten and looked to have human-like eyes. You could see its rib cage and what seemed to be its guts just dangling out. I dropped my phone in a panic and we ran inside. We could hear the gate rattling as we ran towards the door. It jumped the fence. I didn't want to look back. Neither did my friend as we slammed the door and made sure to lock it. Thankfully, the front door was locked too. We ran into my room and hid in the corner. My friend didn't have her phone because her parents would track her location and she snuck out to come over. We had zero ways of alerting the authorities or my other friend who left to get drinks. And after we came to the realization, I heard stomping from outside the window. My blinds were shut, but I could see the shadow of the giant beast outside. It knocked on my window. In the voice of my friend, it said, "Guys, it's me. I have more beer. Open up, it's cold." I held my friend tight. It started knocking harder on the window. It talked again. "Come on, guys, it's cold out here." Its voice became more deep and demonic. We cried in each other's shoulders. Next thing we knew, it was morning. We opened my bedroom door with me wielding a Swiss Army knife and my friend right behind me. It was gone. I ran out to the yard to get my phone and ran back inside. My friend left a voicemail saying he was just going to go home and that he was tired. Once my parents got home, I didn't even know what to tell them, out of fear they would think I was crazy or just be mad that I had people over. After that, I never saw that thing again, and a few months later we moved to a more populated area of town. I still dream about that thing. I just wish I stayed inside for the night. My friend still lives on that side of town. I catch up with her sometimes, and she says she always keeps a firearm with her. So do I. All she wants is to leave Tucson and move to a different city. The land here is cursed, and even though I live in a suburban area, I still feel watched whenever I step out at night. Let's read some more scary Reddit stories. These are all kind of random. There's no real theme for this video, just creepy vibes. Christmas night out quite a few years ago. We were all in a large bar. One of my colleagues was really drunk. Not victim blaming, but it drew attention from a creepy guy. She was also really tiny. I was sitting in a separate group and noticed this man staring at my colleague, not in a, "ooh, she's pretty" way, more of a predatory sizing her up and shifting position so he could keep staring. He really gave me the creeps, but nobody else noticed as they were all messing around, going up for dances, the usual. I ended up alerting one of the male managers, who watched the guy and agreed he was indeed stalking our colleague. And he had a word with her pals, and they kept her close and didn't leave her alone at all. Scary guy clocked me and started stalking me instead. He even tried following me to the toilets, which were quite remote from the bar. Luckily, my manager and another pal followed him, so he went back to the bar. I was really freaking out, so I spoke to the bouncers and explained what was going on. Creepy man got kicked out, we could all relax. Except he started staring at me through the window. He looked absolutely furious, and I was even more scared. At closing time, I had to run to the casino next door so I could wait inside for a taxi. The doorman was really kind and hid me from the guy who was staring at me through the door. He even escorted me to my taxi, and I got home safely. About a year later, the scary guy was front page news. He had raped and unalived a young woman who he followed home from a bar. I still feel sick when I think about it. Driving home after a day date with my partner, it was the evening and dark out. We were driving along a country road and something very large appeared to jump or take flight on our left side from the verge, over the top of the car, and into the night sky. We both saw it, and neither of us could explain what we had seen. The only way either of us could describe it was like the creature in Jeepers Creepers. Similarity was uncanny, human-like with giant wings. We both felt extremely uneasy. We have birds of prey here in Scotland, but nothing that would come close to what we saw. We're both scientists and very rational people. Neither of us had been drinking. Still gives me the chills to think about, and that image will never leave me. So I live in Eastern Oregon, and my mom lives in Western Oregon. I went to visit her for the summer, and she's very outdoorsy, so we decided to take the 1-hour drive from her city to the coast. We end up at this free campsite at the top of this hill, huge foothills of the coastal mountains, about a 25-minute drive from the top where the campsite is to the bottom where the main road was, and we were the only campers there. We relaxed for the rest of the day, made food, etc. A truck full of men drive up the hill and talk with my mom. I don't know what about, wasn't suspicious at the time, and they leave us. Fast forward to the middle of the night. I wake up to my mom sitting straight up in the tent. I wake up easily, so I heard her gasp, and it woke me. As soon as she saw I was awake, she put her hand over my mouth because I was starting to ask her what's wrong. It was dead silent, and all of a sudden, you hear footsteps right beside the tent. The little flap that covers the zipper was even moving. Thankfully, my mom has quick wits and said very loudly, "Kenny, grab the gun." Kenny is my dad, although that doesn't matter, and mind you, he was not there, just as girls like I previously said. They left. No harm was done. Thank the Lord for my mom. While at uni, my friends and I ran out of booze. Hardly any shops were open because it was late, so the only option was to walk the mile or so to the nearest 24-hour supermarket. Between the supermarket and the dorms we lived in was just a row after row of suburban houses which all looked the same. As we were walking down one road, we passed a field with a large campfire and some people riding horses around it. There were people playing musical instruments and general sounds of a good time going on. The horses and fire and the lanterns which were dotted about gave it a very old-fashioned feel. Maybe 5 minutes after passing the field, now walking past houses again, one of my friends commented on how weird and out of place that gathering of people had been. My other friend and I had been thinking exactly the same thing, so, curious, we turned around and walked back to find out exactly what was going on. There was nothing there. Not just no people or horses, there was no field, just more and more houses. Even though we were absolutely certain we were on the right road, as we'd simply turned around, we walked up and down the neighboring roads too. We found nothing. We weren't drunk, though we'd had some drinks, so I've got absolutely no idea what happened that night. Ooh, those were so fun to read. The second one, y'all, can we circle back to that, please? Jeepers Creepers? In Scotland? No, thank you. And also the story in Oregon about the girl and her mom going camping. That mom was so smart, and kudos to her for thinking so quickly and making it seem like they had a man and a firearm with them, because that saved their lives.
Hi Daisy, I would like to be referred to as Natalie. This story is very personal to me because it is a touchy subject. I'm a believer of spirits, supernatural, superstition, etc. So when this happened to me, I felt so uneasy because I couldn't believe I would experience something like this. To give a little background information, I'm a young mom to a 2-year-old, and at the time I had my son, I was living with my family for half of the week and the other half with my boyfriend and his family. That way, I could spend an equal amount of time with everyone with the baby. So when I went back to school, it was February 2020. My baby was 3 months old and I was 17. We had this plan that I would stay with my boyfriend and his family for the majority of the time since he will take me to school. And at this time, they had a daycare for my son, so it was a good school for us. Anyways, my in-laws have always talked to us about when would we get our son baptized, because his parents are religious and are old school Mexicans. And since they are from the rancho, they really believe in the supernatural stuff and brujas. They told me a few stories that back in their day, babies and kids who weren't baptized would get kidnapped or get taken in the night by brujas and get bitten by them, and the babies, kids would be left to die all because they weren't baptized by God to be protected. So when they told me this, I was skeptical and didn't really believe that because I thought that was far-fetched. Well, a few weeks went by and I had this dream. I was at a park, and next to the park was a train station. I was there waiting for the train with my boyfriend and my baby. This lady comes up to us and asks if she can see our baby and hold him. I felt bad vibes from her, so I was politely telling her no. But then she kept insisting that I let her. I was feeling uneasy by this, so I kept telling her no. She was visibly getting impatient and upset. I stood my ground and told her off. Worst mistake, because she transformed to her true self, an old, ugly bruja. She started speaking in Latin and gibberish and cursing me, like actually giving me curses. She was levitating in the air, looking down at us, and was very angry. I was shielding my baby away from her, and as soon as she left, I ended up waking from the dream, and it was the morning already. I felt really off about it. Normally, I would brush off my dreams because I don't take them seriously, but this dream felt too real. It felt like there was a meaning to it. I felt like it was a sign. I'm not sure of what. So I ended up telling my boyfriend about it, and he just told me to relax, that it's probably nothing.
One night in the summer of 1921, a young man named Carl Logies walked across the farm that he had recently purchased in rural Ohio. He was on his way to check on his horses and his cattle one last time before he went to bed. He had a gun on his hip and a lantern in the other hand, and as he walked across the farm, he sort of looked out at the farmhouse and the barn up ahead and the water well and all this land, and he couldn't help but feel really proud of what he had. I mean, this was all his. So Carl had always dreamed of having this, of having his own farm, and he'd been able to get this one for a really low price because apparently the people who owned it before him had been very eager to get rid of it, and he had seen it as a great opportunity. Now, Carl didn't really know why they wanted to move it so badly, but he didn't care. It just meant he got a great deal. And so Carl continued walking over to the barn where his cattle and his horses were, and as he got closer, keep in mind it's dark out, it's late at night, he suddenly felt the hairs in the back of his neck stand up, and he had this unmistakable feeling that he was being watched. But Carl, he lives alone. It's just him and his animals. Like, there's no reason there would be anybody nearby to watch him. And so instinctively, Carl stops where he is and he whips around and he shines his lantern in all directions, just seeing if there's somebody there, but there's nobody. Granted, his field of vision is pretty limited. I mean, it's dark outside, his lantern's not that bright, but for the most part, he can tell that there's no one in the immediate vicinity. He's all alone. So then his thought is, well, is there a predator nearby? I mean, is there an animal watching me? But Carl, he's looking around, and it's a peaceful, quiet night, and the previous owners certainly hadn't mentioned any risk of predators in the area. And so Carl tells himself, he's just being paranoid. He's new to this property. He doesn't really know what it's like to be here. And so he tells himself, you're just overthinking it. Go to the barn, take care of your animals, and just go to bed. Everything is fine. And so Carl turns around and he walks over to the barn. He goes inside and he kind of busies himself getting the horses and the cattle ready for the night. And, he's in there for a few minutes. And for the most part, he's forgotten about that strange feeling he had when he came over, that feeling of being watched. But after he was wrapping up, he couldn't help but start to feel like he had that feeling again, that there was somebody watching him. And so he's looking out his barn door and he doesn't see anything, but it's dark out there and he's kind of looking around the inside of his barn. And again, he's telling himself that you're being paranoid, everything is fine. But admittedly, deep down, Carl was feeling pretty nervous about just this walk he was going to have to make through the darkness across his property back over to the farmhouse. But, he steeled his resolve. He grabbed his lantern and he checked his gun on his hip. And then he walked out the doors of his barn and began quickly making his way towards his house. And as he's walking, he's kind of scanning both sides, checking to make sure nobody's out here, and he's not seeing anyone. And right as he's about halfway to his house, something catches his eye on the far side of the property, something kind of off in the distance. And he stops and he aims his lantern in that direction, which doesn't really illuminate that much, but it illuminates enough to see that there's actually somebody standing on his property. And he's so alarmed by it, he just stands there holding his lantern, looking at this person, and it's like this white silhouette just standing there still, looking right over at Carl. They're sort of in the vicinity of his water well. And after being frozen for a second, Carl kind of snapped out of it and he said, "Hey, who are you? What are you doing here?" And this figure doesn't move, doesn't react. They just stand there kind of staring at Carl. And then they turn and begin kind of moving away from Carl in the direction of the water well. And Carl, at this point, he doesn't know what's happening. He thinks that this person clearly is some sort of trespasser. They must have been here earlier. That's what I was feeling. They were here. They've been watching me. Are they going to try to rob me? Who is this? And so he draws his gun and he starts chasing after this person. And as he's running, his lantern's waving back and forth. And as he's running, he loses sight of this white figure. And by the time he actually gets to the water well, he realizes he's lost this person. They're just gone. At this point, Carl really didn't know what to make of this. He didn't know where this person went. He has no idea if they've doubled back around and they're going to, try to go in his house at some point here. He does not understand what's happened or where they've gone. He doesn't know who they are. And so all he can think to do as he's standing there by the well, out of breath, from running there, is just to yell out that, he's got a gun and he's not afraid to use it. And don't you dare come back here. But despite yelling out these sort of open-ended threats into the darkness, there's no response. And he doesn't see this white figure anywhere. It's just dark and silent in all directions. And so for a while, Carl just stood there at the well, just, looking out, almost expecting to see this figure reappear. But they never did. And eventually, when it really felt like everything had kind of calmed down on his property, He just turned and run the rest of the way over to his farmhouse. He went inside and locked the door behind him. Now, the next morning when Carl woke up, he tried to tell himself that whatever happened the night before, it had to be an anomaly. Like maybe that was a neighbor who had come over and they were shy, or maybe it was, a potential trespasser or a thief or something, and they were scared off by Carl's threats of being willing to use his weapon. Like Carl is telling himself that whatever that was last night, he likely would never encounter that person ever again, and it was handled. But Carl was wrong. Almost every single night from that night onward for the next year, at about 9:30 p.m. every night, around the time that Carl would go to the barn to check on his animals before bed, he would always see that figure. And they were never close enough that Carl could actually see who it was or get any sense of what they wanted. They were always just kind of off on the side of the property, always watching Carl every time he came out of the barn. And then when he would invariably scream at them and run towards them, and even at one point he fired his weapon in their direction, every time this figure would just, without saying anything, move away from Carl in the direction of the water well, and around there, Carl would lose sight of them. They would just vanish. Now, as much as Carl really wanted to pretend that this was just something explainable, that this was some person coming on his property that was evading his capture every single night, as much as he wished that could be the explanation, Carl knew, despite not being a very superstitious or, a believer in the paranormal, despite not being those things, he felt like what he was witnessing was a ghost. I mean, what else could it be? It's this white figure that floats away from him and vanishes every night. Like, that's a ghost. And also, another part of Carl was thinking, like, the previous owners were really excited to sell this property effectively at a loss. It's like they just wanted to be rid of this property. And he couldn't help but feel like, maybe there's a connection between what I'm seeing and why they left. But the one thing that Carl hung on to was that despite how unsettling this whole thing was and how terrifying it was to, see this figure floating around on his property, despite that, the reality is it was pretty predictable. Every night around 9:30, he would see this ghost, whatever it was, but it didn't really affect him or his animals. It was just terrifying. And he accepted that. It just sort of became his new normal. That is, until August 1st of 1922, which happened to be almost exactly a year after Carl had purchased this property. On that day, Carl noticed his horses, his cattle, they stopped drinking the water, the well water that he gave them all year long since he had been here. They'd never had any issues with it, but on that day, they just stopped drinking it. And in fact, they were kind of skittish around the water, like there was something in the water that was upsetting them. Carl tasted the water, it tasted fine to him, but he assumed there just must be something in it that made it unclean to the animals. And so what he had to do was clean the water, which meant he needed to drain the well, get rid of all this dirty water, and let the well refill, and hopefully at that point it will be clean. So Carl goes over to the water well. Remember, this is always where the figure goes off and disappears to. And as the water began to drain, he realized there was something in the well, clearly deep in the well that he never would have been able to see unless he drained it. And here he is draining it, and he's looking down, and he can't quite tell what it is, but eventually the water was shallow enough that it was obvious what was in the bottom of his well. And at that point, he went and got the sheriff. It would turn out 5 years earlier, Carl's farm had been owned by another man whose name was Frank Lerman. And Frank, when he was here, had multiple employees, including a young farmhand named Henry Leipenstick. And one day, Henry had gone missing. Henry didn't have any family or close friends who lived nearby, and so basically everybody in town assumed that Henry must have just left town. But one of Frank's neighbors had told the sheriff at the time that she didn't actually believe that. She thought maybe Frank himself had done something to Henry. Because according to her, Frank and Henry argued all the time about money. Like there was clearly real tension between those two. The sheriff tried to look into Frank to see if there was any legitimacy to this claim. But at the same time this investigation was beginning, Frank abruptly sold his property and moved away. And without any real evidence, the sheriff couldn't prove there was any foul play involved. And so he just had to close the case and move on. Until Carl, 5 years later, drained that well. And suddenly, the Henry Leipenstick case was solved. Because at the bottom of the well, Carl found Henry's very decomposed body. He was practically skeletal by this point, but they could tell that was Henry. An autopsy later revealed that Henry had died of blunt force trauma to the head, and his death was ruled a homicide. Frank was arrested and found guilty of second-degree murder, but he only served 7 months before his charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence, and he was released. When they pulled Henry's remains out of the well to give him a proper burial, they noticed he was wearing a watch, and the watch had stopped at 9:35 p.m., precisely the time that Carl, for a whole year, saw that white figure running off, disappearing over towards the water well where Henry's body was located. After Henry's body was properly buried, Carl never saw that white figure ever again. Also, it's believed that the previous owners right before Carl, who sold him the property at a discount, likely they were selling it because they too had seen Henry's ghost.
This right here is one of the creepiest things that you can experience, and thank God it was removed, cause what the hell. The thing you just saw was a video game called Sad Satan. The video game appeared around 2015 on the deep web, and from the place and the name of this game, you know that something is wrong, but you're not ready for what's next. It all started in 2015 when a YouTuber called Obscure Horror Corner found a link in a forum, and obviously the link was this game right here. Now, him not exactly knowing what is this, he probably thought it was just a horror game, so he clicked on the link and downloaded it. And when he launched the game, he pretty much got stuff like this, the title, and simple disturbing levels with black and white distorted images. But this is where the scary shit begins, because the more you advance in the game, the weirder and scarier stuff you will find. For example, you will find disturbing images like this, but let me tell you that this is only surface level, okay? And from now on, I'm not showing images, okay? First of all, because they're hard to find, and even if I found them, I am not showing them, I'm not displaying them. I told you, the more you advance in the game, the more this shit becomes messed up. If you're asking how, well, at some point, you will see videos of people getting... Yes, I'm deadass, I'm not even joking. At some point, the game will force you to watch videos of people getting violently unalived. You know, basically the word that you get when you remove the L from lore and replace it with a G. Now, some people might be like, okay bro, I mean, I've seen worse. I know somebody that watched this stuff every day. What's so different here? Well, let me tell you that we're not finished. Because if you keep going anyway, then you will start hearing whispers and screamings of children. And yes, they are real. Guy who made this game, I don't know where the fuck he found all the videos, all the recordings, but he did. And if you like the game, then you are forced to see them all. If you're still not convinced that this is the creepiest shit somehow, well, let me tell you that in this game, I mean, this is the last thing, and if you're not convinced, bro, I don't know what's wrong with you. In this game, there is CP. If you don't know what CP means, man, you're a good guy. Stay like this. I didn't know what CP stands for until I searched the game. Oh, also, did I mention the fact that the game is a virus? Well, not completely, kind of. Once you execute the game on your device, PC, whatever, then it completely starts acting by itself. The game wants to freeze randomly, then it will freeze. If it wants you to see a message in your damn own PC, then make sure that you will see it. Whoever made this game is unknown, okay? Until this day, nobody found him. And don't worry, you cannot play this game. The game is entirely removed. It's damn near considered a lost media, meaning you cannot play it anymore. Even if you try to look it up, then you will only find the fake ones, okay? The real one was wiped off. I mean, thankfully, because what the hell is this?
Around 1 a.m. on Sunday, January 20th, 1907, a 57-year-old man named Samuel Hughes was riding on a passenger train that was moving through southeastern Wales. Sam had spent basically the last 24 hours working the entire time. He was a salt merchant, and he had left the town where he lived, a town called Blackwood, and taken a train south about an hour to another town called Newport, where he did a lot of business. And basically all day Saturday, from early morning all the way until late at night, he had been working. And now finally, 1 a.m. on Sunday, he's back on a train heading back to his town in Blackwood. But despite how utterly exhausted he was on this ride back home, barely able to keep his eyes open, Sam was just so relieved that soon, very soon, he would get off the train, he'd be back in his house, and he could just collapse in bed. And so that's all he's thinking about. And so for a little bit longer, Sam is, fighting to keep his eyes open, and the train's rumbling along, and he can tell he's getting close to home. I mean, he rides this train all the time. This is a pretty, regular route for him. And then finally, Sam feels the train start to slow down, at which point he gathers up all his things. He gets up and kind of shuffles his way into the hall. And then once the train came to a full stop, he stepped off the train onto the platform, relieved that, he's now maybe 10 minutes from home. But as the train took off from the station, Sam, who's again standing on this platform, it's late at night here, he's looking around and he realizes something. In his stupor, in his exhaustion, he didn't realize this was not his stop. He had gotten off one stop too early. It was like he was on autopilot. He was so tired. He got off thinking he was home, but he wasn't. And now the train is gone. And remember, this is the early 1900s. He didn't have a quick way to get from where he was to his home. Like there wasn't going to be another train anytime soon, nor did he know the train schedule. He also didn't have a way to call a cab or anything. It's 1, 2 in the morning here. And so Sam realizes he basically can either find a place to stay in whatever town this is, or he can basically walk to Blackwood, which is, a pretty good walk away, but he figured, maybe, this town was close enough he could do it. And so he figured, his first step here is just leave the platform and just go find somebody, anybody in town that maybe is out and about, and just kind of figure out where we are. How do I get to Blackwood? Is there a hotel nearby or an inn or something? But he needs to go find somebody. And so even though Sam at this point is furious with himself and really just wants to spend time dwelling on the fact that he's made this mistake, he's sort of over that, and he's just focused on finding a solution. And so Sam leaves the platform and he starts walking, in the general direction of lights that he sees off in the distance. But this is a small train platform. He's clearly not near any major city. It's pretty much dark and just rural roads going in different directions. And so he really does not have high hopes that he's going to run into anybody anytime soon. But surprisingly, after leaving the platform and walking not very far, he got to an intersection where he saw another person walking up the other street. And he quickly realized it was a police officer. And so Sam is so relieved, an authority figure, they can help me. And he flags down the police officer, and the officer comes over and, they're kind of sizing up Sam, like, what are you doing out here? It's the middle of the night. You got luggage with you. Like, what's going on here? And Sam explained the mistake he had made and asked the officer, like, hey, is there a place to stay here? Or maybe, is it walkable to get to my town, Blackwood? And the officer would tell him, like, there is places to stay in this town, but if you're up for it, it would only take you, maybe an hour if you did want to make the walk to Blackwood. And, if I was in your shoes, I might do that. And Sam, he thought about it and he was like, you know what? I just want to get home. I want to get in my own bed. So yes, just point me in the right direction. And so the officer, he explained to Sam that luckily it's really simple. You just basically go straight down that road and you walk for about an hour until you reach a bridge. Once you get over the bridge, follow some signs and it'll be really obvious that you're right near Blackwood, and you'll make it the rest of the way. And so Sam thanked the officer and then gathered up his things, and he began walking in the direction of his town. Several hours later, a little after 3 a.m., Sam's wife, Bess, was awake inside of their home in Blackwood. She was awake because she was waiting for Sam to get home. She knew he would have a long day in Newport, but by now she knew he should be home. He went on this trip fairly regularly. She knew how long it took, even on the long end, and it being 3 a.m. and him not being home was starting to be pretty concerning. And so she's up, she's kind of anxious, and all of a sudden, she hears Sam calling out to her. He's clearly out in front of the property. He must have known that she was awake. He could see the lights on inside the house, and he was calling out to her that, he was returning. And so Bess, she's overcome with relief. She knows her husband is safe. She grabs a candle, and she goes to the front door to greet her husband. She opens the door, and she looks out, and it's not her husband. Her husband is nowhere to be found. Instead, there is this dark figure standing on her porch, just inches away, looking right at Bess. And Bess, she freezes when she sees it, but she isn't scared. There's a weird calm about what she's looking at. She doesn't know what it is. She has no idea what to do, but she's just standing there, calm, as this figure is right in front of her, not moving. And as she's just staring at it, she realizes it's dressed in this long black cloak, and it had on a black silk hat. And her husband always wore a black silk hat. And she knew specifically he had worn it that morning when he went to Newport. And so for a minute, she's just staring sort of unbelievably at this apparition, apparently wearing clothes, at least a hat, that belonged to her husband. And she knows she just heard her husband call to her. She didn't imagine that. He just called to her. But then Bess blinked, and the figure just vanished. The hat, the cloak, it's all just gone. And there's nobody standing on her porch. And now Bess is scared, because as much as there was a calm about this figure, now she's thinking, like, did I just imagine that? Like, what's going on here? Is my husband outside somewhere? Did he call to me because he's hurt or something? And so she leaves her house with this candle, and she's running around her house calling out for Sam, but Sam's not out there. And so eventually Bess goes back inside the house and just continues to sit up waiting for Sam. But Sam doesn't come home. And eventually, by 5 or 6 in the morning, Bess just goes to bed. When Bess woke up later that afternoon, Sam still had not come home yet. But now, the sun is out, and she's telling herself that weird thing that happened last night, she must have imagined that, like, that didn't happen. And, Sam's fine. He'll be home. He's stayed late before and not told me, like, everything's okay. But as Bess is reassuring herself that everything's okay, she hears a knock on the front door. And for a second, she thinks maybe it's Sam, maybe he's home. But she goes to the door, she opens it up, and it's a police officer. And he just says to her, I have some terrible news. It would turn out the night before, when Sam met that police officer who told him to walk this way to get back to Blackwood, Well, Sam had followed the directions, and apparently he was on the right path because he got all the way to that bridge that the officer said would, demarcate that he was close to Blackwood. But perhaps because he was so exhausted, or maybe just because it was still so dark outside, he fell off the bridge to his death. And so the police officer is telling Bess this, and she's totally overcome with grief. But then for whatever reason, her mind immediately went to that dark figure she saw on the porch a little after 3 a.m. And without really thinking this through, she just said to the officer, "What time do you think he died?" And the officer was like, well, based on the officer that directed Samuel in that direction, towards the bridge and how long it would have taken him to get there, we estimate he likely fell off the bridge around 3 a.m. And so for Bess, she's thinking, that's around the same time I saw that figure on my porch. And then she also began to think about that hat, the black silk hat that Sam always wore, that she knew he had worn that morning when he went to Newport. And so Bess's next question was, well, when you found him, was he wearing his black silk hat? And the officer was kind of confused and said, no, he wasn't wearing a hat at all. And so when Bess heard that, those details confirmed that who or what she saw on her porch earlier that morning, the dark figure with the black silk hat, that must have been Sam's soul. He was coming to say goodbye to his wife because he had just fallen off the bridge and died. And, this figure having that black silk hat on was a way of showing her that, yes, that really was her husband. Bess would later tell this story to a reporter who would have this story printed all over Wales, and that's how we know it today.
These two best friends counted down from 3 and stabbed their other best friend to death. And when police asked them why, they casually said, "We just didn't like her anymore." So this story starts with this girl named Skylar Reese. She's 16 years old, living with her family in West Virginia. And one night, Skylar's lying down in her bedroom, scrolling through her phone, when suddenly it buzzes. She glances down and sees that it's a text message from her two best friends in the whole wide world, Sheila and Rachel. They're basically asking her to sneak out and hang out with them. And even though it's past midnight and way past her bedtime, Skylar doesn't hesitate to say yes. I mean, these aren't just random girls texting her, these are her girls. And so she quickly sets down her phone, gets up from her bed, and grabs this little wooden bench that she keeps in her room. She positions her bench under the window and slowly pushes the window up, trying to be as quiet as possible so that her parents don't hear her. And then she climbs out of the window and into this warm summer darkness. And waiting for her outside is Sheila in her silver Toyota Camry. She rushes to the back seat, says hi to her friends, and they drive off into the night. Inside the car, the three of them are just laughing, joking around. I mean, to Skylar, this honestly feels like any other night. Just 3 best friends sneaking out for another late night adventure. But what Skylar doesn't know is that hidden in the trunk of the car, buried underneath some blankets and towels, are kitchen knives, sharp ones, carefully wrapped up so that they don't make any noise. There's bleach, industrial cleaning rags, a shovel, and 2 completely fresh sets of clothes. Because Sheila and Rachel weren't taking Skylar out to have fun or something. No, they're taking her out to murder her. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, Angie, how did 3 best friends end up on a road in the middle of the night with 2 of them having murder in their minds? So let's just rewind a bit so that you understand how the heck we got here. So Skylar and Sheila had been best friends since they were like 8 years old, and because of that, these 2 were basically inseparable. Like, Sheila was at Skylar's house constantly, and I mean constantly, like to the point where it honestly felt like she practically lived there. But then freshman year comes around and someone new joins their group. It was this girl named Rachel. And at first, everything was honestly perfect. Like, the 3 of them became this tight little unit, and they're posting photos together all the time, matching outfits, matching poses, doing all of these typical best friend stuff. But then, very slowly, something like started to change. Skylar starts noticing that Rachel and Sheila are getting weirdly closer and closer. It was very subtle at first. It was little things like Rachel and Sheila showing up to school dressed the exact same way, like color coordinated outfits, and Skylar standing over here in whatever she managed to throw on that morning, like, no one told me we were matching today. And they would just be like, oh crap, I guess we forgot to text you, sorry. Or other times it felt like they they'd be whispering secrets behind her back or creating these inside jokes that suddenly she wasn't a part of. And it got to the point where Skylar honestly started to feel like she was third wheeling in her own friend group, the group that she was literally there first for. And pretty quickly, the three of them started fighting constantly and hanging out with each other less and less and less. But Skylar just couldn't understand what she was doing wrong. I mean, she was watching her two best friends pull away from her for no reason. Until one day, Skylar discovers the real reason why they're suddenly pushing her out. Rachel and Sheila are together, like romantically, like smooch together. I think y'all know what I'm trying to say here. We're all grown, right? Anyways, Rachel and Sheila had been secretly dating each other, and they've been trying to keep this a secret from everyone, including Skylar. And when Skylar finds out about this, she's obviously pissed off, but it wasn't because her friends were gay. The issue was the lying, the sneaking around, the fact that her two best friends, the people that she trusted the most in the world, had built this entire secret life together and just shut her out of it. She honestly felt more betrayed than anything else. So enraged with all of this boiling anger, she pulls out her phone and she does what any teenager in that moment would do. She gets on Twitter and she just starts going off on Sheila and Rachel, saying things like, "You're a two-faced bitch and obviously fucking stupid if you thought I wouldn't find out. Yikes." Or another one where she says, "Too bad my friends are having lives without me." There's more to it, but you get the gist. Skylar was fuming with rage and she was just spamming tweets left and right. And when Sheila and Rachel see these tweets, they start to panic because in their paranoid minds, this isn't just Skylar being upset or venting. This is Skylar threatening to expose their secret to the entire world. I mean, they are terrified of what would happen if people found out, because this is a small town in West Virginia where like super conservative families live. And even worse, Rachel's got this super Catholic family, so coming out was not an option for them. So in that moment, Skylar becomes a threat, a problem, a ticking time bomb that could potentially destroy their lives at any moment. And so in their twisted paranoid brains, they decide that there's only one way to handle this. They have to get rid of her permanently. But like, you could also just talk things out with each other, but hey, what do I know? I'm just a girl who does true crime videos. Anyways, one day while they're in forensics class, and yes, the irony is absolutely insane, instead of paying attention to the teacher, Sheila leans over to Rachel and starts talking about how they could take Skylar's life and get away with it. And here's the crazy thing. Other students actually hear them whispering about it, but no one took them seriously because, I mean, come on, who the heck is actually going to murder their best friend, let alone plan the whole damn thing in their forensics class? So most of the other students just kind of figured it was girl drama because they're in some stupid fight, except Sheila and Rachel were disgustingly dead serious. So serious that eventually, after days of planning, Sheila and Rachel secretly meet up and they start filling up the trunk of that silver Toyota with everything that they needed to get the job done. First, they grab kitchen knives, not like special hunting knives or anything, just regular knives from their kitchen. Then Rachel goes to her dad's garage and she steals his shovel so that she can dig a hole and bury her body. And then they decide to make a trip to Walmart or CVS, wherever they went to, and they bought cleaning supplies and gloves, basically everything they needed to clean up a crime scene. And then, and this is to show you just how calculated things are getting right now, they pack backup outfits, like extra jeans, shirts, clean socks, everything, because they know that things are about to get really messy and they're gonna get covered in blood. And so once they finish loading everything into the truck, they close the lid, they look at each other, and they're like, "Okay, are you ready for this?" And Sheila's like, "Yup." And she pulls out her phone. And that's when she messages Skylar saying, "Hey, do you want to hang out tonight?" Which brings us right back to Skylar secretly climbing out of her bedroom window, getting into that car to hang out with her two best friends, thinking that they're just about to patch everything up and talk about the fact that they've been lying to her. And after driving for about 30 minutes, they eventually pull off into this narrow road. It was pitch dark and it was so quiet that you could sort of hear your echo if you screamed loud enough, but it was still far away enough from neighboring towns that if someone just so happened to scream for help, no one would hear. But again, at this point, Skylar did not suspect a single thing because this was also the same spot that they would come to almost all the time to just hang out, smoke, before all of the drama. And so the three of them just very carefully get out of the car and they start walking into the woods a bit. They walk maybe 40, 50 feet from the car, just far enough that you can't really see the road anymore. And then that's when Sheila pulls out a blunt and is about to start smoking it. But then she's like, "Oh, damn it, I forgot the the lighter in the car. And Sheila looks at Skylar and she's like, hey, do you think you can go to the car and get it for me? So Skylar turns around and starts heading back towards the car. And with her back now facing them, Rachel and Sheila, sort of with this devilish look in their eyes, they start counting. 1, 2, 3. They reach under their hoodies and they pull out the knives that they packed from before, and they both run up behind Skylar and start stabbing her over and over and over again. Skylar has no idea what's going on, but she screams with this sudden pain that she's now feeling, and she tries to run away, but she only makes it a few steps before Rachel jumps on top of her and tackles her straight to the ground. And now they're wrestling each other. Skylar's trying with all of her might to grab the knife out of Rachel's hand, but she just keeps stabbing her over and over. And at some point, Skylar manages to grab the knife out of Rachel's hand, and she slashes at her ankle so hard that she leaves this 3-inch gash that just starts gushing blood. But Sheila still has her knife gripped firmly onto her hands, and so she keeps stabbing Skylar over 50 times. And through it all, Skylar manages to get one word out. Why? With this look of betrayal and sadness, she just keeps repeating it. Why? Like, that's all she's asking, until eventually her throat fills with so much blood and the sounds become gurgles, and then eventually nothing. And Rachel and Sheila are just standing there, breathing really hard, looking down at their best friend's body lying in the dirt. Rachel's ankle is bleeding everywhere. Both of them are covered in blood. Their hands, their arms, their faces, their clothes, their knives are dripping. I mean, they honestly didn't think it was going to be this hard. They thought stab, boom, dead. But Skylar did not go down without a fight. But right now, they had absolutely no time to think about that or even catch their breaths, because the sun was about to come up anytime now. One of them runs back to the car, pops open the trunk, and they pull out the shovel and they start trying to dig so that they can hide the body, just like they planned. But they run into a very big problem. The ground is way too hard for them to dig, and they're like, crap, we don't have time for this. We need to go now. So in a moment of panic, they drag her body just a few feet deeper into the woods, and they start covering it with whatever they can find. Branches, leaves, dirt, rocks, they just pile it all on top of her until at quick glance, you can't really see her anymore unless you know what you're looking for. And then they rush to the car, they strip off their blood-soaked clothes, and they change into their clean outfits that they had just packed. Then they take a couple of wet wipes and they start cleaning everything. The knives, the shovels, their faces, the inside of the car, the door handles, anything they think they might have touched, they clean. And by the time they're completely done, it's 4 in the morning. They quickly get back into the car and they drive home before their parents could even notice that they were gone. And nobody would notice that Skylar was gone until 4 p.m. So that afternoon, her father Dave comes back home from work and he's expecting to see Skylar already at the door, because she was supposed to borrow his car so that she can drive to her 4 p.m. shift at Wendy's. But when he walks into the apartment, he sees no Skylar. So he screams out, "Skylar!" but no response. So he walks over to the bedroom and he reaches for the handle and he notices that it's locked from the inside. And he's like, okay, that's weird. So Dave walks back outside the building and goes around to Skylar's window, and that's when he sees that it's wide open. And at first he's super annoyed, because in that moment he's like, oh my gosh, my daughter must have snuck out last night. So he calls her cell, but it goes straight to voicemail. So he texts her, but no response. So he just kind of figured, okay, she has work later, maybe her friends are dropping her off or something, I'll just discipline her later. But then that's when David's phone starts ringing, and when he looks down at it, it's Skylar's job calling. So he picks up and they're like, hey, is Skylar coming in for her shift today? She's not here. And that's when Dave knew that something was seriously wrong, because not once has Skylar ever, in the 6 months that she's worked there, missed a shift. So Dave immediately hangs up and calls the police, and super quickly they show up and they start looking at the security footage that surrounds the apartment building. And that's when they see that around 12:31 in the morning, Skylar hopped into some back seat of some car before driving away. And the officers are like, okay, I mean, well, this is clearly a girl who snuck out with somebody that she knows willingly. And because of that, her disappearance was classified as a runaway case, not an abduction. Just a teenage girl who snuck out with her friends and decided to not come home yet. But police do notice the make of the car, and after investigating for a little bit, they found out that the car belonged to Sheila. And so they bring her in for questioning since she is now technically the last person to have seen her. And Sheila very calmly tells them, yes, I picked up Skylar at around 11, but I dropped her back off at her place like an hour later. And that's when the detectives are like, wait a minute, somebody is lying here. Because when they had checked the security cameras, they can clearly see that Skylar was picked up at 12:31 a.m., not 11, like Sheila's saying. So that's like an hour and a half off. And on top of that, there is no footage of a car coming back to the apartment to drop Skylar off. So the detectives decide to also question Rachel, hoping to kind of like catch them in a lie since their stories would clearly be different. But when Rachel sits down for her questions, her story matches almost word for word with what Shayla had told them. And to the detective, this is a massive red flag because no human memory works like that. Like when two people experience the same event, they remember it slightly differently. Different details stick out to different people, but for Shayla and Rachel's stories, they're like carbon copies of each other. So detectives decide to start digging deeper. They get warrants for the girls' cell phone records and they start looking at the locations that they had previously been to. And that's when they notice something incredibly more suspicious. Cell phone tower data shows that both Sheila and Rachel's phones were near this remote road and for quite a long time too, at around 4 in the morning, which is extremely suspicious because the girls claimed that they went back home after dropping Skylar off at her house at 12 a.m. So one of the detectives decide to bring both the girls in, but for separate interviews, and they choose to do that so that they didn't work together anymore and they couldn't come up with another lie. And the detective basically goes, hey look, your story honestly makes no sense. Like we have footage of you picking Skylar up but not dropping her off, and on top of that your phone location shows that you were at some remote area at like 4 a.m. Can you explain that? And Rachel, trying to stay calm, but you can clearly see that she's like stressing out, decides to change up her story a bit. She tells them, okay, well actually, after we dropped Skylar off, she like suddenly ran off into the woods and we couldn't find her. So we like drove around for a little bit looking for her, but eventually we just gave up and went back home. And that's why our location is showing us there. And the detectives are like, okay, you're good to go. And then the very next day, detectives decide to question Sheila, and what do you know? Her story also magically changes to match Rachel's new version, like word for word. And so police are like, okay, look, if you girls have nothing to hide, then why don't you take a polygraph test? And Sheila agrees. She takes the test and she fails every single question about Skylar. The needle goes haywire. And Rachel agrees to take one too, but on the drive to the testing facility, like while the car is stopped at a red light, she just throws open the door, jumps out, and takes off running down the street. They eventually catch her and bring her back in, but by that point, she just refuses to take the test. And so at this point, detectives know for like almost 100% certainty that these girls did something to Skylar. But without a body, without physical evidence, there's just nothing that they can charge them with. And so at this point in time, it was honestly starting to look like Rachel and Sheila were just gonna get away with their crimes forever. Until December 28th, 2012. It's 6 months after Skylar's murder and Rachel is at home with her family, but something inside her just breaks. Like all the moments of carrying this huge dark secret is really starting to take a toll on her mind. And out of nowhere, she just starts screaming at the top of her lungs. She's hitting her parents and running through the house like a complete maniac. And her mom, Patricia, is terrified. Like she does not know what's going on. So she calls 911. And you can hear the panic in her voice as she desperately says, I need help. I have a 16-year-old daughter. I can't control her anymore. She's hitting us. She's screaming at us. And so police arrive and they physically restrain her because she was just acting like a complete madman. And they end up sending her to a psychiatric facility to get evaluated and see what the hell was wrong with Shorty. But the facility found nothing wrong with her. So just 5 days later, she got released. But when her mom came to pick her up from the hospital, the first thing that Rachel says is, take me to the lawyer's office right now. And her mom is sitting here all confused like, okay, hi to you too, Rachel. But she just did what her daughter said and drove her straight to the office. Rachel walks in and sees her attorney there along with a detective and an FBI agent. And that is when Rachel just starts bawling her eyes out so hard that she can barely even speak. But eventually, she tells them everything. And when she's finally done, when she has completely emptied herself of this horrible secret that she has been carrying for 6 months, the detective asks her a single question that everyone wants to know. Why? Why did you do this? Why did you kill your best friend? And Rachel looks up with these red, swollen eyes because she's been crying so freaking hard. And she says, We just didn't like her. Anyways, at some point, Rachel leads a convoy of police vehicles to Greene County, Pennsylvania. They drive to Morris Run Road. They park on the side and they get out, and Rachel starts walking into the woods, and at some point, she just stops and points there. At first, investigators don't see anything. They just see like a whole bunch of pieces of wood, leaves, branches, rocks, whatever. But then they look a little closer and they see it. It's this mound that isn't quite natural, and it's covered with a whole bunch of debris and dirt. And so they carefully start removing the branches and then the leaves and the rocks. And that's when they see it. It is Skylar's body. But after 6 months of rain and snow and heat and animals, Skylar's remains are barely recognizable. And on one afternoon, after making sure that the body was definitely Skylar's, Dave and Mary get the call that honestly no parent should ever receive. And whatever tiny sliver of hope they'd been holding on to, that maybe Skylar was somewhere out there still alive, that maybe she had just run away and she would come home someday, was completely gone the moment that detectives told them their daughter was found deceased. And the girls that they treated like family, Sheila and Rachel, are the ones who did it. But here's the part that just gives me the chills. It really shows you how cold Sheila really was. On March 30th, 2013, this was after Rachel's already confessed, after the body's been found, after the whole world knows what happened, but it was before Sheila had been arrested. She hops on Twitter and types just 5 words. We really did go on 3. Oh my God, I am so done with this girl. Let's just get to the good part. In the end of 2013, Rachel was sentenced to 30 years in prison with the possibility of parole. But as of right now, her parole has been denied, which is like, good. Stay over there, please. And as for Sheila, she was sentenced to, say it with me, life in prison. It's like a song. It makes me so happy when I say that. But look, moral of the story here, please don't murder your best friend or anyone for that matter. Just talk it out. I love y'all so much. Mwah. Group hug.
These are a list of paranormal red flags that are disguised as new beginnings. Number 1 is any new relationships or friendships that automatically feel way too intense. This is not normal. Almost like it's trying really hard to lock you in. Real connections happen naturally. They don't need to be intense. They definitely don't need to feel urgent. If you're feeling anxious around this person, it's time to cut that new connection off. Number 2, you start to feel like you're feeling drained or exhausted anytime you're around this new person. That is literally your body reacting to their energy and the fact that they're just not good for you. Time to cut that off as well. Number 3, you keep dismissing like small discomforts in order to protect like this new relationship or this new friendship. You try to tell yourself like, oh, it's too soon to judge, or maybe let me give it some more time, let me see what happens. No, that's a red flag that we should not ignore. Stop wasting your time. If something feels off, it's because it is off, and it's time for you to. And number 4, ever since this person came into your life, you feel like your sleep has dramatically changed. You're having a really hard time staying asleep. You're waking up multiple times a night. Any new person or any fresh start should not affect you in that way. That is your sign that this person is feeding off of you. This is my new favorite thing. Just cut it all off. Cut it off.
Late one night in the winter of 1933, a young nobleman named Anton Holberg poured another round of drinks for all of his buddies who were sitting inside of one of Anton's many sitting rooms inside of his huge castle that he owned in southern Poland. And after pouring these drinks, Anton kind of clumsily began walking his way over to the table where his buddies were. And because Anton was pretty drunk, because he and his friends had been drinking for hours and playing cards and partying, Anton stumbled at some point and basically spilled half of the drinks onto the carpet. But because he was so drunk, he just thought it was really funny. And so did his friends. They were all roaring with laughter as he's on the carpet, picking up all these basically empty glasses. But then instead of going back and re-pouring the drinks, Anton, sort of as a joke, walked over to the table, sat down, and handed out these basically empty cups to his friends. And everybody thought it was so funny. And they didn't even get up to get more drinks. They were just all so drunk and happy, they just kept on playing their card game. And so as Anton's sitting there and everyone's laughing and smiling, the friend of his that was the dealer for this round of blackjack began to deal. But as he did, there was this sudden, really loud creaking sound that came from right above them. And it was so loud and so pronounced that even amongst this loud room of drunk men playing cards, everybody heard it. And there was a moment of silence where everyone sort of registered like, what's going on above us? And in this sudden stillness, Anton, he sort of made a jest and he goes, oh boy, that's the monk. Now, for the most part, everybody at the table, all of Anton's friends that were there, they had heard the story of the so-called hooded monk that apparently haunted the castle. That's at least what Anton would say. But one person who was there that night was a new friend of Anton's, and they had not heard of, the monk story. And they said, well, what are you talking about? That's the monk. And immediately everyone's like, oh, geez, here we go. Because Anton, he looked over at the friends and he was like, oh, you haven't heard the story of the hooded monk? Let me tell you. And then Anton basically told this friend, as the rest of the friends are all like, give me a break. This is just crap. This is not real. But Anton would tell this person, this newbie, that when he took ownership of this huge castle, he was told that everything's fine, except there's one bedroom upstairs that's totally off limits, because apparently it is haunted by a hooded monk, an evil hooded monk that sort of patrols this room. And Anton told this friend that he actually had never gone in that bedroom because he believed the story was true, that maybe, just maybe, there really was a malevolent spirit, a hooded monk figure that was in there. And also, he had tons of bedrooms in his castle. He didn't need to go in there, but, right above us is that off-limits bedroom. And so maybe that creak we heard was the monk. Now, again, basically everybody in the room knew this story because Anton loved to tell the story of how his castle was haunted. But that's all it ever was. It was just some story that Anton told. But this friend, when they heard this from Anton, their reaction was, wait a minute, you have a bedroom in this castle that you own that you literally haven't gone inside of because there's a ghost in there? Are you kidding me? You literally haven't gone in that room for that reason? And as they said it out loud, all of Anton's other friends sort of picked up on how cowardly it seemed for Anton to have never gone in. Suddenly this story just made it seem like Anton was just kind of a coward. And everybody just piled on. They're like, yeah, Anton, why haven't you gone in there? Come on, man, this is your castle. Go in that bedroom. And before long, Anton was no longer happy to be talking about the story. He was like, oh, yeah, just forget about it, guys. Let's get back to our game. But nobody would let it go until finally they dared him, like, hey, not only should you go in there, but tonight, you should stay the night in that bedroom to show us that you're really not afraid. And eventually, because Anton was so drunk and he was sort of standing up for his pride, he finally said, fine, fine. I'll go in there and I'll spend the night. Fine, I'll show you that this is just a story. It's no big deal. Now, after Anton loosely agreed to this, he likely thought that, the guys will forget about this and we'll go back to playing cards. And by the end of the night, nobody's going to make sure I really go into that bedroom tonight. They're going to forget about this. But no, the friends would not let this go. And at the end of the night, when they had kind of wound down their card game and everybody was feeling pretty tired, they all were like, okay, Anton, we're going to walk you up to your bedroom to make sure you sleep inside of that haunted room. And because Anton had already publicly declared that he wasn't afraid and he would do it, he was like, okay, let's go. And so the group, with Anton in the lead, they left the sitting room and they went up the stairs to the second floor and they go down the hallway to the bedroom where supposedly, this hooded monk ghost resided. And the door, it wasn't like barred up or anything, but, again, Anton had never been in there, but he had grabbed the key. And Anton, he goes up and he sort of nervously unlocks the door. And then before pushing it open, he turns and looks at his friends and he's like, all right, I'm going in, trying to see if they really wanted him to do it. And all his friends are sort of looking at him sort of hesitantly, but they're like, yeah, go inside, go, do it. And Anton's like, all right. He pushes the door open and he and his friends, they all look inside. For the first time, Anton is now laying eyes on the inside of this bedroom. And really there was not much to see. I mean, it was a bedroom and there was old furniture in there that looked like it had been there for hundreds of years, covered in dust, and there's cobwebs everywhere, but it basically just looked like a really old bedroom that nobody used. And so his friends are like, all right, Anton, get in there. And Anton's like, all right, I'll see you in the morning. And he goes inside the room and he shuts the door. And then the friends, they all walked back down the hall, went into their respective bedrooms where they were sleeping, and everybody went to bed. Several hours later, in the middle of the night, as all the friends are all asleep, there's this sudden, extremely loud, blood-curdling scream that appeared to be coming from the bedroom where Anton was, inside the haunted room. And so the friends, they jump out of bed, they run into the hallway, they go down the hall, and they get to the door and they try to open it, the room that Anton's in, but it's locked. And they start banging on the door, yelling, Anton, are you okay? Are you okay? Because even though they had put him up to this, they had dared him to do this, they didn't really think there was any risk. But at the same time, maybe there was something bad in there. So they're worried. They're worried about Anton. They want to make sure he's okay. But after pounding and yelling on the door, there was no response. The haunted bedroom where Anton was completely silent. And the friends, they all kind of exchanged worried glances and they're like, we got to get in there. We got to make sure he's okay. Something just feels wrong. That scream, that's somebody in danger. Like Anton could be hurt here. And so they began smashing this door, ramming into it until finally they literally blew the door off its hinges. And when they looked into the room and saw what was going on, they couldn't believe it. When Anton went into the bedroom to spend the night, his friends would recall hearing the sound of him turning the key and locking the bedroom door behind him. So Anton is in this haunted bedroom and he's locked inside, and there's no other way in or out of this bedroom. So he is in there totally alone and he's locked the door. So keep that in mind. So now a few hours later, after hearing the scream, the friends blow the door open, literally knock it off its hinges because it was locked, and they find Anton. And he's dead, and he's laying on the bed on his back, and the only sign of something that happened to him is there's this red mark around his neck, like a ligature mark, a thin red ligature mark around his neck. But there's no rope or line anywhere in the room. There's no sign of a struggle. There's nothing else really in this room except for Anton. And he's just inexplicably dead with this mark on his neck. Authorities got involved and they searched the room top to bottom, and they never found any rope or any line, nothing that could have left those marks on his neck. And they also did an autopsy on Anton, but they couldn't figure out what his cause of death was. So just the fact that Anton died in this really inexplicable way in a bedroom that he claimed was haunted is pretty mysterious. But it becomes even more mysterious when you consider the whole story about this ghost that haunted this castle. So Anton, when he would typically tell the story, would just basically say, well, there's this evil hooded monk that is upstairs in one of the bedrooms, and that's why I don't go in it. And that's kind of the whole story. But that's not the whole story. That's just kind of the version that Anton would tell. The whole story was this castle has been haunted for hundreds of years. There is an evil monk that lives in that bedroom upstairs, and if you go in there, the evil monk will kill you by strangling you with a thin rope. That's the story. And so it really makes you wonder, because to this day, nobody knows how Anton Holberg died alone in that locked bedroom after seemingly being strangled by a rope that didn't exist.
Weird spooky story time. Glitch in the Matrix Reddit thread. I saw this once over 30 years ago. I was laying on my bed crying my eyes out as my lovely Nan had passed away. I loved and missed her so much. Suddenly, above and in front of me, I saw this gray swirling vortex type thing. I suddenly had the knowledge that it was her. It wasn't like a thought, it was just a certainty. Somehow I knew it. I looked at it, and then suddenly from nowhere I got scared. The minute I got scared, it disappeared. I always wondered if I hadn't gotten scared, what I would have seen. My Nan? Did she leave because she didn't want to frighten me? I've always regretted it. What are these portal vortex things that people are seeing? Is it like a portal to the afterlife? Is it a portal to a parallel universe? Is it a portal to just some other plane that we don't understand? I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, or if any of you have ever experienced something like this, send it my way.
Linda Blair was 14 in 1973 when she starred as Regan in the original Exorcist film. She has spoken about the rumored curse related to the movie, such as accidents and a fire that nearly demolished the set. She stated she didn't have any paranormal experiences on set, but in her own life is a different matter. Linda Blair grew up in a historic, heavily wooded area. One day, her sister and one of her friends took Linda to a certain part of the woods that seemed strangely familiar. They came upon a very old house, and this stunned them because they were very familiar with the area, had been through it many times, but never seen this house before. Linda was somewhat apprehensive and reluctant to approach the house, but the other two girls persuaded her to join in exploring. The large front door was heavy and stuck shut, but eventually it cracked open with a creak. Linda's sister and her friend went toward the staircase, and they all climbed to the top. Linda felt out of place and not right about being in the home. Suddenly, they all heard a loud noise from downstairs, like movement. Frightened, they listened and thought they heard talking. They ran downstairs, with Linda bringing up the rear. The other two girls got out, but the front door slammed before she could escape. She kept pulling on it, trying to get out, and could hear heavy footsteps behind her. When she turned to look back, she saw a tall man, a woman, and a little girl beside them, all walking towards her. She was terrified, sure they were going to get her. Right then, the front door flew open, and Linda's sister grabbed her hand and pulled her out. Much later, she heard about a family near where she had lived that had been murdered in the 1920s. She felt sure these were the spirits she had seen.
I've never heard this story before. This is crazy. I always say when someone has an experience and they're feeling or connecting it with something, 90% of the time they're correct. And so we don't ever dismiss that. But there's more. I can feel a human actually living in that home. Like there's like a below, like a basement, or see something like underneath the house that someone lived in, or it was just a basement and someone actually was in there and they weren't supposed to be living there, but they lived there. And then I'm also feeling super dark beings, two in particular, that had nothing to do with this family that also lived in that home. And that's who slammed the door shut. And that's also who kept the door shut, because that family wasn't doing that. She saw them, they were real, but who had that force and that energy was another being. Two beings in particular, very, very, very big beings, dark, and an aggressive energy, which is why they slammed the door, which is why they were scaring her, completely separate from that family that also lives in that home. Hopefully they tore that home down, but there's a lot going on in there, and that poor girl, that must have been very scary.
Tara Calico's case is one of the most haunting cases there is, and there's still no justice for her. On September 20th of 1988, Tara Calico was just 19 years old. She would often go on bike rides that went along New Mexico State Road 47. She would often go with her mother, but after an incident where a vehicle had been kind of following her mother too closely, passed her several times, her mother was too nervous to go on these routes, but Tara continued to go. Tara's mother did tell her to take Mace with her, but Tara refused. On this day, Tara had made a joke to her mother saying, "If I don't come back, you better come looking for me." And now, understandably so, she had been doing this bike ride for years. Nothing bad had ever happened to her, so she felt safe. Tara had a 12:30 date with her boyfriend to go play tennis. Now, noon came around, Tara never came back. In fact, she didn't come back at all. Tara's mother drove up and down the road looking for Tara. She found nothing, so finally she contacted police. They did start searching for any sign, and all they found was her Walkman and a cassette tape. Tara's bike was never found, but Tara's mother does think that she dropped her Walkman on purpose to leave a trail because something bad had happened to her. There were several people who came forward, did say that they had seen Tara riding along this route, and there was a light-colored pickup truck that they felt like was going along with her on this route. Investigators started thinking that maybe Tara had left on her own, but this doesn't really add up because Tara was a very happy person. She had a date that she was trying to get to with her boyfriend. She just wasn't the type to run away. Tara's case would eventually go cold until January 15th, 1989, about 9 months after she disappeared. Somebody found a Polaroid of two people tied up in the back of what looks to be a van. This Polaroid was found in Port St. Joe, Florida. This is about 1,500 miles away from where Tara went missing. The woman who found the Polaroid called police immediately, said that there was a white Toyota van that was in the spot where she found the Polaroid. She also said that there was a man with a mustache in his 30s who was driving the van. This Polaroid would gain national attention when it was featured on America's Most Wanted, and Tara's friends called her mom and said this might be Tara. At first, her mother wasn't sure, but there was like a discolored portion of her leg that Tara also had, and this really convinced her that this was in fact Tara. You can also see this book right here. It is by the author V.C. Andrews. This was one of Tara's favorite authors. This also further convinced her that this was in fact Tara. Now, while her mother was convinced, the FBI and other authorities were not convinced that this was in fact Tara. But there's one thing that they all agreed on. This was a recent picture that was taken. What makes this even stranger is that the parents of Michael Henley came forward. They thought that that was him as well. He went missing in New Mexico around April of 1888. He had been on a hunting trip with his family. His family believed that this was him, but this would later turn out not to be him because he was found in New Mexico's Zuni Mountains, about 7 miles away from the campsite that he went missing, and he had passed away from exposure long before this picture was even taken. Tara's family would eventually make the move from New Mexico to Florida in hopes of finding Tara. They just haven't lost hope that their daughter is out there somewhere. There have been countless tips that have came forward about Tara's case. Nothing has ever came up with it. They haven't come up with anything. It seems like she absolutely just vanished into thin air. But in 2008, Sheriff Rene Rivera did come forward, and he was the sheriff of the county that she went missing in, but he came forward and said he knew what happened to Tara. knew who did it, but he didn't say any suspects' names. All he said is that 2 men who were teenagers at the time that Tara went missing were following Tara on her bike. Some kind of accident happened, they panicked. But he didn't release any suspect names, which seems very odd to me. It also upset Tara's family because they deserve to know what happened, but he said it was all circumstantial evidence. He said that these 2 individuals had disposed of her body. Without a body, he couldn't press any charges. The whole thing just seems kind of weird to me, but there have been other pictures that have been found since Tara went missing. This is one of them. It is of a woman sitting next to a man on an Amtrak train. Some people believe that this is Tara, but it really just seems too blurry to know for sure. There was another photo found that many people believe is Tara. This was found at a construction site in California. Some people believe that this is also Tara, but the picture was taken somewhere in May of 1989. This picture that you're looking at looks to have been taken in the 1990s. But again, none of this has ever led to anything as far as finding Tara. Tara is still missing to this day, and her family still does not have justice. Tara doesn't have justice, and it just doesn't seem fair. So what are your thoughts on this case? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more true crime. The Trans-Allegheny Asylum in Weston, West Virginia is considered one of the most haunted places in all of America. Once you look into the history of it, it explains why people might think this. This place was open for 130 years, from 1864 all the way until 1994. Now, the construction of this building is fascinating and it's worth a read on its own, but we're not going to get into it here. We're going to talk more about the life that the patients had and then the supposed hauntings that are happening now. When this asylum first opened, they had new ideas of how they wanted to treat mental health in the country. It was built with plenty of sunlight coming in so that patients could have plenty of sunlight. There was acres for them to walk. They had other things that they could do, like learning how to sew and how to farm. The idea was to get patients to have calming activities, also help them build skills that could help them outside of the facility once they were released. But as time went on, they became overcrowded. This facility was meant to hold 250 patients, but that soon reached up to 2,400 patients in the 1950s. As you can guess, they were very understaffed and well underfunded, so they were not able to give the patients the care that they needed to have successful lives outside of the facility. Considering that they were so understaffed, doctors were no longer able to look out for each of the patients. So not only did the patients start killing each other, they started killing nurses as well. There was even a story of a nurse who went missing for several months until she was found at the bottom of a stairwell, having been killed by a patient. But it wasn't just the violence that we can talk about within these walls, it was also the treatments that doctors would come up with. In the 1930s, doctors started putting patients into insulin comas, and they used this as therapy. They thought that if they put them into an insulin coma or a diabetic coma, this would reset the brain, help them deal with their mental health problems. Doctors thought that they could rewire the brain and then they could cure their patients, but they didn't talk about the brain damage that it was causing, the prolonged comas, and even death. They also introduced seizures, thinking that this was also a way to rewire the brain, and then our most popular was lobotomy. But lobotomy, as we now know, would cause major issues, leaving some patients with motor control issues, memory issues, or even leave them in a vegetable state. Many patients never made it out alive, and if you didn't have family to come and collect your body, you would just be buried in their grave that they had on site. So it's really not hard to believe that spirits might still linger here. There are a few kind spirits that are wandering around. Some think that they're nurses and patients that are just kind of roaming the grounds and the nurse is still taking care of patients. But other people have heard more sinister things like screams, full body apparitions, being tugged and pulled, and those kinds of things. I don't know about you, but I do think it's not far-fetched to think that there are spirits who still linger here. But what are your thoughts on it? You can tour this building a couple of times a year, and if you're brave enough. I don't think I am, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Follow for more spooky things.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
Her body lay there in the woods, crumpled up with a broken neck. Then she started blinking. It was the 29th of April 2006 in Belleville in Illinois. The locals were absolutely worried sick. This 17-year-old girl from the area, Ashley Reeves, had vanished. Now, she was a lovely girl. She lived with her younger sister and her parents, and I believe she was job hunting at the time when she went missing. She'd actually intended to just go to an interview that day, play basketball, and come straight home. She took a change of clothes, obviously, because she wasn't going to play basketball in the same clothes that she went to her interview in. She said to her parents, "Don't worry, I'll be home by 10 p.m. But time ticks on, and she never showed up, and her parents were like, she can't be playing basketball this late. So her parents tried to retrace her steps. Now, what they did know from that day is that she had borrowed her boyfriend's car. Now, this was Jeremy Smith, but as far as the parents knew, he was a nice guy. I mean, he'd been super helpful giving her the car to take to the interview, and he'd not seen her since. Mum just had this gut feeling. She was like, I know something bad has happened. So she called the police. And the police did their usual, maybe she's out hanging out with friends, maybe she's run away, maybe she lost track of time. I hear this so much, guys. Maybe I'm just being unfair here, but I really do feel like a lot of the time police do just shrug these missing persons cases off. But time dragged on, and it was getting more and more obvious that something bad had happened. And after 8 hours of Ashley still being a no-show, police found something very worrying. It was the boyfriend's abandoned car. And inside of that car was the spare change of clothes, which proved Ashley had never even made it to basketball that night. So what stopped her? Now, it was actually kind of a blessing that Ashley was so young that her mobile phone was actually registered in her mum's name. That meant police could get permission from the mum and then obviously from the telephone company that they could get all of the phone records. And they found out she had multiple calls off a very surprising contact, her teacher, Samson Shelton. So officers contacted him, and honestly, he was incredibly sus from the get-go. He actually said he had nothing to do with her disappearance and just put the phone down. Like, surely if that was your student and they were missing, you would be concerned. And when Ashley's friends started getting wind that she was missing too, they actually came forward to police and they were like, no, he's definitely got something to do with this, because she was actually kind of seeing him like in a romantic way. I guess you would say that he was grooming her because A, she was so young, and B, he was also in obviously a position of power as a teacher. And infuriatingly, even when they brought him in for questioning, he still couldn't keep his story straight. Lies upon lies upon lies. Constant denial until hours and hours of questioning was finally kind of breaking him down. He eventually admitted to seeing her that day and being in that car with her, and he claimed that they argued, but get this, he was making out like he was the victim. It was like, she was obsessed with me, she wouldn't leave me alone, and we ended up having this argument. He said that she was provoking him and he got her in a headlock. He then said he heard a pop and was like, oh my god, what have I done? Horrifically, he admitted to then putting a belt around her neck. He said he pulled as hard as he could using his foot for leverage. The belt then snapped and he used his own bare hands to choke her again just to make sure she was dead. Now, obviously, the police are still interviewing him at this point, finding all this out. And by this time, it was 30 hours since she vanished. Police knew time was running out and they could potentially be losing valuable evidence. So they were like, tell us where she is. He was like, fine, I'll lead you to the body. Little did he know they were going to find a lot more than they bargained for. He took them through Citizens Park to where Ashley lay. And the one officer was like, okay, she's clearly dead. Then her eyes started to move. By some miracle, this girl was alive. I mean, if you've seen the video, you know exactly what I mean. She looks like a body. They were filming this for a true crime show. You can actually watch it online. You can watch them find her. She was bitten half to death by bugs and she was contorted in a way. Honestly, it doesn't look possible for a human to be twisted in. But she was alive. She was raced to hospital. She was put in an induced coma and she ultimately had to learn to walk and talk again. But she managed to survive. I mean, one of the most badass women I've ever heard of. Samson was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but infuriatingly was released after spending just 17 behind bars.
27 years later, they still do not know who would do this to such an innocent young girl. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Shamika Ray. Viewer discretion is advised. This case will take us to Beulah, Alabama, and it's 1999. Shamika Denise Ray was born in 1988, and she lived in Alabama her entire life. I know Shamika had at least one sister who was about 16 years old when this case occurred. Shamika was described as an incredibly bright and very friendly young girl. She had a big, beautiful, friendly smile, and even at the age of 11, she was just kind to everyone. At about 10 p.m. on January 27th, 1999, Shamika would say good night and I love you to her family. She would go to her room, which she shared with her 16-year-old sister, and she went to bed. The following morning, her mom is getting up and, getting stuff done around the house when she goes to check on, the kids, and Shamika is no longer in her bed. She is no longer in the house. She is missing. Based on information from the sister who shared the room with her, they know Shamika was in her room at about midnight, so she disappeared sometime between midnight and 7 a.m. They would soon report her missing, but unfortunately it would not take very long to find her. Along Chambers County Road 269 and Judge Brown Road, there was a bus of kids going down the road when the kids looked out the window and noticed something very strange on the road. They alerted the bus driver, who then stopped, got out of the bus to see what this was. It was the body of a child. And this poor girl had been bludgeoned to death. And sadly, she was soon identified by her father as Shamika Denise Ray. She didn't have any issues at school with anyone. There didn't appear to be any issues in the home. And the other thing is, they don't even know why this happened, because from what the coroner states, Shamika was not raped. So how did this 11-year-old girl in the middle of the night get out to this road and then was bludgeoned to death by someone? How did that even happen? According to the sister who shared the room with her, she heard nothing out of the ordinary. Didn't see anything either. Her parents were, also in the house. They didn't see or hear anything. I don't even know if they know exactly how she got out of the house in terms of was it a bedroom window? Was it the front door, a back door? They don't know if she was lured out or if someone abducted her right from the home. But then how would nobody hear or see that? I mean, it's happened before. It is possible. I've covered cases before where, the suspect is caught, it wasn't known to the family, and no one heard it. So it is entirely possible. Did she leave on her own accord? They don't know. And that's the sad thing. They just don't know. They don't know who did this. They don't know why it was done. They don't know how she got to be where she was found. There are so many questions with zero answers. It doesn't sound like they have any forensic evidence like fingerprints, palm prints, like on windowsills or doors. Or if they do have those things, they haven't matched anyone. It doesn't sound like they have any DNA found on her body because, again, they don't believe she was raped. But that doesn't mean that her clothing wasn't touched by someone where you can get touch DNA, which back in 1999 wasn't a thing. I also don't believe the police suspect anyone in the family of being involved. The family has been continuing to put pressure on the police, rightfully so, to solve this case. There is a monetary reward for any information that helps lead to her killer. And somebody somewhere out there has to know the truth about who did this to this 11-year-old child. And if you're afraid to come forward, you can report information anonymously if you need to. They just need the answers. They need to know who did this so that that person can be put in prison. So if you have any information on the murder of Shamika Denise Ray, you were asked to please call the Chambers County Sheriff's Office at 334-864-4335. It sure sounds like she was abducted in the middle of the afternoon. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Kim Leggett. Viewer discretion is advised. This case takes us all the way down here to Mercedes, Texas. Kim Sue Leggett was born on December 27th, 1962, and I know for a fact she had at least one younger brother. And it sounds like growing up that they were really close and she was like a really fantastic big sister. Eventually, Kim would get married, and the two of them had a son together who was 1 year old at the time this case occurred. At the time, Kim was actually in school to become an X-ray technician. And obviously, she needed to make money, so she was working a job. She actually worked for her father-in-law's business. It was the Ross Cotton Gin Company. And that is where Kim was working on the afternoon of October 9th, 1984. At 4:30 p.m., a delivery driver would come to the building to, deliver some produce. Kim was there. She helped check in the produce. The delivery driver left. That same delivery driver comes back 30 minutes later with another delivery, and this is now at 5 p.m. But at this time, Kim is no longer there. Her blue car, and this is an actual photo, was still there. The door to the Cotton Gin was open and unlocked. And like I said earlier, Kim was going to school to be an x-ray technician, and she was clearly studying at this point in the day because they would find like her open books for this class. They found a pad of paper with a pencil. She was clearly taking notes. She had her calculator, which she had already turned on, and it was still on. At 4:45 p.m. that same day, and this is actually before anyone knew Kim was missing, Kim's parents, which included her mom and her stepfather, they got a phone call stating that Kim had been kidnapped and that they were going to be calling back with a ransom demand. But her parents thought it was a joke, and they just kind of hung up the phone. And then the stepfather calls the cotton gin to see like, hey, Kim, what's going on? We got the stupid, joke phone call, but nobody answered. That's when he gets to his car and he drives to the cotton gin to see like what's going on. And when he gets there, this is now after the point when the delivery driver had come. He goes inside and finds no one. They would later find out from the delivery driver about this window of time. After searching for her and calling friends and other family, they couldn't find her. They report Kim missing. And of course, police being police, especially back in this time frame, they said, she's an adult, she's allowed to go missing, it's not illegal, call us back and later. And they did not take this seriously from the get-go, because it took them a long time to start treating this like an actual missing person. They didn't even get the FBI involved for like months, I believe. At one point, the parents receive a letter, and inside that letter was a handwritten note demanding $250,000 for Kim's return. The letter itself, by all accounts, appeared to actually have been written by Kim herself. However, the writing on the envelope certainly did not match her handwriting. This was clearly somebody else. At this point, they now firmly believe that Kim was abducted. She was kidnapped. In the very early portions of the investigation, a witness came forward to state that sometime between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m., they drove past the cotton gin and they saw what looked like Kim standing next to her car talking to two white males standing next to a car that looked like this. Now, this is right in between the time when the delivery driver had last seen her and then came back at 5 and she was no longer there. And certainly there was no other car there. The witness who, only really got a look from afar would help police come up with a couple composite drawings. They don't know exactly how accurate these really are, though. But clearly, she was abducted sometime around 4:45 p.m. Because if you remember, 4:45 p.m. that same day is when her parents got that ransom call. Have they traced that call? I don't know. Kim, like I said, was married. They certainly thought at first, the husband, because obviously you have to always think about the husband first. He did not resemble either of the two men that person saw. They looked into him very thoroughly. They checked his alibis, his whereabouts, everything, and they actually end up clearing him. This happened in the middle of the day. It was broad daylight whenever it happened, but allegedly nobody saw the actual abduction and no one heard anything. Her car was left behind, her purse was inside, all of her belongings. She had absolutely nothing with her. She loved her child. She would never just abandon her kid, and she has never been seen since. Obviously, at this point, they know foul play was involved, and at this point, Kim is very likely deceased. Again, had people taken this seriously right from the beginning, had the FBI become involved very quickly, you don't know if she would have come home alive or not, but you'll never know. What if the ransom stuff was legitimate? What if it was real? What if you could have paid that and gotten her home? I don't think they ever actually found out, though, where the letter actually came from and who made that phone call. It was a lot harder to investigate that kind of stuff back in the day. I do know that in recent years they have swabbed the envelopes to see if they can get some DNA from it, but it doesn't sound like it's led them anywhere yet. But they don't have anything else. They don't have a crime scene. They don't have a body. They don't have anything. They don't have fingerprints, nothing. This is pretty much what they have. Somebody somewhere out there knows the truth about what really happened to Kim Leggett on that day. And perhaps that someone is you. If you have any information on the disappearance of Kim Leggett, you are asked to please call 1-800-252-8477. You can also call 1-800-346 3243. You can remain anonymous. If you know something, now is the time to come forward and say something. She agreed to take someone's shift for them, and unfortunately it led to her murder. Hello, true crimer-ers. This is the case of Valerie Brooks. Viewer discretion is advised. This case occurred at the very end of 1990, and it happened in the little town of Versailles, Kentucky. That is where 22-year-old Valerie Brooks lived. Valerie was the proud mother to 2 young children. Her family would say that Valerie was the type of person who wanted to take care of everybody if she could. Family and her friends were the most important thing in her world, especially her kids. Valerie was a fiercely loyal person, and she was someone who would always, help cover a shift at her job if she needed to. And that's unfortunately what happened here. Valerie worked here at Thornton's gas station there in Versailles. And it was New Year's Eve, 1990. Valerie was not supposed to work that night, but one of her employees had to have that shift filled in or covered, and so Valerie took it. The next thing they know is that at 1:40 a.m., Valerie would trip the burglary alarm inside the gas station. But when the police arrived at the store, there was nobody inside. Valerie wasn't there. Valerie was also working the shift on her own, something that unfortunately was very common back then, to work an overnight shift by yourself. At the crime scene, they didn't really notice much of anything, like any kind of sign of altercation. However, they did know for sure that it was robbed. $230 had been stolen from the cash register. Later that day, about 9 miles away from the Thornton's gas station, someone was driving past down this road and they saw the body of a woman just on the side of the road. Police would arrive and they confirmed that this was a deceased woman. It was 22-year-old Valerie Brooks. She had been raped and stabbed to death. They do have DNA from her body, DNA that was not hers, that they believed would clearly belong to her killer. However, back in 1990, DNA technology was still very, very new, and it wasn't very advanced. And there wasn't like a big database where you can plug it in and boom, you got a suspect. But they do have it. Her brother Michael would say, quote, "If it was random, it's something that someone was going to repeat. Nobody does, and I've said this in the past, nobody goes to that level of violence over that long a period of time, and it just only happens once." Which I agree with. Kidnapping someone from a gas station, raping them, and brutally murdering them, that's not one of those one-time things. And the fact that this person wasn't caught makes them more confident. I've done it before. I can certainly do it again. Maybe Valerie was the I can do it again person. She may not have been the first victim of this person. Years later, there would be a potential connection to a serial killer, a suspected serial killer named Glenn Rogers. He became known as the cross-country killer. He had 2 confirmed victims, but police believe he had at least 3 more. He claims he killed up to 70 people. But there was a point where he was a suspect in this. But in May of 2025, in the state of Florida, he was executed by lethal injection. I have to assume they looked into that and maybe even tested DNA, and he just found out he wasn't actually the guy. But he was thought of. In terms of the DNA that they have, I don't know for sure. I can't tell you for certain that they have put it into the database to see in today's world that if it's matched to anyone. Because now we do have that humongous database where you put that profile in and it gets you a match. The fact that there's no arrests tells me that there have been no matches. I said this in a recent case as well. I don't know why every police department isn't just doing genetic genealogy, because it is proven time and time again that it solves cases, old cases. And from what someone has said, it sounds like some states are different with how they can handle that. Sometimes warrants are needed. And I know also it costs a lot. Still baffles me that it's just not something we can just do to catch a murderer and get a killer off the streets. But at this point in 2026, Valerie's case remains unsolved. It sounds like everyone in her life, every one of her coworkers have all been ruled out. And they do believe that this was a stranger on stranger crime. Likely a crime of opportunity that led to rape and murder. Robbery that led to that. Someone somewhere out there knows the truth, and perhaps that someone is you. If you have any information on the murder of Valerie Brooks, you are asked to please call 859-873-3126.
I need somebody to tell me why in the fuck y'all go out here and get married and you know you still old. Have y'all ever heard of Robert Marks from Baton Rouge, Louisiana? If you have or have not heard of this down bad, no good ass motherfucker, you got to know we about to talk about it. Stay with me and pay attention. Now, Robert Marks was an assistant principal at a school. The kids loved him. They would prefer to go to him to be disciplined if they got in trouble or whatever. He was always trying to be helpful with other staff members, just an overall good person to be around at school. Now, it was said by quite a few people that Robert was going through a separation with his wife or whatever. He had 2 kids, but he was really trying to just move on because they hadn't had so many fucking issues in their motherfucking marriage. Now, one day, Robert interviewed Miss Lintel Washington for a teacher's position at the same school that he was the assistant principal at. Lintel told her homegirl, oh, bitch, I know I got this motherfucking job because he couldn't keep his motherfucking eyes off of me. Show as shit stank. The next day, she got a phone call and she got the motherfucking job. Now, Lintel had already went through a divorce and she was a single parent. She was definitely looking for companionship and she wanted somebody to be able to help her out with her finances. Now, a little time go on or whatever, Robert flirting with Lintel. So Lintel asked him, like, ain't you married? He told her the same thing everybody else told her. He going through a motherfucking divorce. He also explained to her that they had a big old 2-story house and the house is big enough that he don't got to see his motherfucking wife when he there. They don't sleep in the same bed. The marriage just over with. Now, Lintel's friend was like, girl, you don't think he moving too fast? He's still up in the house. He ain't done got divorced or whatever. And Lintel was like, nah, because the marriage been over. Now, at this motherfucking point, she head over heels for Robert. Got a little change in his pocket, got a big-ass motherfucking house. He not with his motherfucking wife for real, and he educated. Everything she fucking wants. So they start dating or whatever. But bitch, they decided to make their motherfucking relationship official and get intimate. Tell me why they was at that motherfucking school in the bathroom hunching, bitch. If you still watching, put in the bathroom in the comment section. Now, they getting super freaked out at this point, bitch, because they go all around the school in a bunch of different motherfucking places, fucking all over the school. Somebody got to help it. And it's an even bigger motherfucking thrill because don't nobody at the school know they fucking around for real. Nevertheless, relationship going on, and then boom, Lintel find out she pregnant. She called her homegirl, say, bitch, I'm pregnant. The girl was like, girl, what Robert say? Lintel was like, oh, he happy. Robert started spending the night at her motherfucking house, going do little family shit with her and her motherfucking baby, the whole 9 yards. Now, up until right motherfucking now, they see and talk to each other every motherfucking day. Ain't been no issues with this shit. Until one day, she just could not get in touch with him. She let 2 fucking days go by, and then she calling and texting him like, what's up? What's going on? You trying to dodge out on your motherfucking responsibilities with this baby I'm pregnant with? After a while, she couldn't get in touch with him, so she go to the Book of Faces and start searching for him, bitch. But she ain't find his shit. She found the wife shit. Baby, when she found the motherfucking wife page, she called her motherfucking homegirl. By the way, her homegirl name is Melissa. So she tell Melissa, girl, get on the Book of Faces and go on this motherfucker and look up Kayla Marks. Soon as they went on her motherfucking Book of Faces page, bitch, biggest motherfucking day, this is what the fuck they seen. A picture of Robert and Kayla on a motherfucking cruise. Lintel going the fuck off. She hooping and hollering in the phone telling Melissa, bitch, do this look like a motherfucking couple that's going through a fucking divorce? All Melissa could do is say no. I don't know why it took her so motherfucking long to dig up on this motherfucking social media page. Because, bitch, I don't give a fuck. We ain't even got to be talking. I ain't got to like you for real. Just depends on the type of energy you give me. And, bitch, I might type your motherfucking name anywhere, bitch. The Book of Faces, Google, Instagram, bitch, even fucking YouTube. These motherfuckers is crazy out here, bitch. Nevertheless, she turned into a motherfucking private eye, bitch. She done pulled up the motherfucking address to the house and the whole 9 yards. And Ted and told Melissa, I'm about to pull up at that motherfucker house and let his wife know what the fuck going on. Melissa was like, don't do that motherfucking shit, because that woman probably don't know shit about you. You can't pop up at her motherfucking house. Break the bitch. Now, Lintel ain't go to the house, but she definitely rolled by that motherfucker. Once again, she pissed the fuck off. She called Melissa back. She said, bitch, you ready for this? Melissa was like, what happened? What's wrong? Lintel said he ain't got no big-ass 2-story house. Bitch, he got a trailer. She real motherfucking hot now, cause now I'm pregnant for a motherfucking married man, and bitch, you living in a motherfucking trailer. Now, it ain't shit wrong with living in no motherfucking trailer, but I understood where the fuck Lintel was coming from. Bitch, you said you had this big elaborate ass motherfucking house, and I pull up and see a fucking trailer. Now, when Lintel seen this motherfucking trailer, in her mind, she thought about having to struggle some more with a second motherfucking baby. Even bigger to Lintel, like, I'm pregnant for a married man. That didn't sit well with her. Lintel told her friend, I'm gonna go back to this motherfucking house and I'm going to talk to the wife. She ain't go. But Robert, down bad dog ass, got back from the motherfucking cruise. She asked her motherfucking friend, bitch, should I go talk to this ugly motherfucker in person? And her friend was like, yeah. Look him in his motherfucking eyes and talk to him. Now, Robert met up with Lintel and her baby at Walmart. He drove his motorcycle, so he left his motorcycle at Walmart and got in a car with Lintel and her baby. They drove down the road a little bit or whatever and pulled over and parked in this motherfucking parking lot. Bitch, tell me the fuck why he shot that girl in front of her baby. Drug her body to a motherfucking sugarcane field and left her there. Now, the next day, this little guy that was doing medical transporting seen a little girl in the parking lot. Mind you, she's 3 years old. And she in this parking lot by her motherfucking self. So he like, where your mama? Where your mama? Now, she was kind of shy, so she wasn't saying much to the man. Then he noticed the little girl had some dried up blood on her motherfucking feet. So he called the police, telling the police, I done found this little girl. She got blood on her feet. So finally, he walked over to the motherfucking car and see blood all over the car. Baby, they took that baby to start talking to the little therapist, people trying to get questions up out of her. The woman asked her, did something bad happen to mommy? That baby said yes. She say, who did this to mommy? The baby say, Mr. Robbie. Lady was like, did you hear anything? The baby said, yeah, I heard boom with my ears. Now, they did bring Robbie down bad dog ass in to question him, but they ain't have a body yet, so they had to let him go. Now, the police finally got a motherfucking break in this motherfucking case when they put on the motherfucking news that they had seen some camera footage of somebody picking this motherfucker up from the crime scene. When this particular person seen the fucking location, she called the motherfucking police. Her name was Tremika Jackson, bitch. And she was the girlfriend of Robert Marks. She told the police, I don't know what was going on. He just told me that he needed a ride and to come and pick him up. But she said, when I seen this shit going on the news, I had to call y'all to let y'all know I seen him that night and I picked him up. Now, a couple of weeks after searching for Lintel, they finally found her after a sugarcane worker was out in the field checking the crops or whatever. The body was already decomposing, so they went on ahead, did DNA samples or whatever. They confirmed it was Lintel, and they confirmed that the little girl that she was pregnant with was for Robert, down bad dog ass. June 10, 2016, Robert was arrested. In 2021, Robert went to trial. There was so much motherfucking evidence against him, it really wasn't nothing to do but go your ass to motherfucking jail, bitch. He was Googling how could he unalive a motherfucking pregnant woman with bleach. How if he could shoot her and unalive her and the baby. Stupid shit. Nevertheless, it took the jurors 30 minutes to come up with life with no parole for his dirty, down bad ass.